So, a while ago, I made a video about why I thought Wreck-It Ralph was an impeccably perfect movie, as in flawless. Unfortunately, that movie is not the subject of this here video. No, my friends, we are gathered here today to discuss a cinematic tragedy, a movie so horrendous that it has descended to the lowest most rung of Disney movies, the unspeakable depths that I like to refer to as the Unholy Trinity, since there are only 3 movies that are that bad in that category. This being one of them. Oh, and don't worry, we'll get to those other 2 Unholy Trinity movies eventually. Feel free to leave your guesses as to what those other 2 Unholy Trinity movies are in the comments down below. And this movie I'm referring to, which I'm sure you all know because you've seen the title and thumbnail, is of course Ralph Breaks the Internet. Ralph Breaks the Internet is a movie that, when I first watched it, I thought it was fine. Nothing particularly special, probably in the lower half of Disney's animated run, but not on the same level as some of their other terrible movies. And then I saw a little video on YouTube titled, "Why Ralph Breaks the Internet is a Cinematic Disaster," and upon reaching the end of this video, I started to think, you know, he kinda has a point. And ever since then, my opinion on this movie has been slowly decreasing. As not that long ago, I rewatched the movie for myself again, and it was terrible. I was almost ready to give up watching about over halfway through. And then I watched it again, and upon this most recent watching, I now despise this movie with every fiber of my being.
There are some corners of the universe which have bred the most terrible things. Things which act against everything that we believe in. They must be fought.
It is indeed just that bad. And if you don't know why, then trust me, you will know by the end of this video. Even though in Schaeferless's video on why Ralph Breaks the Internet is a cinematic disaster, he tore the movie apart, I honestly don't think that he was harsh enough. This movie is beyond abysmal, even down to the smallest of details. The only parts of any worth in this entire movie are the production values and maybe a few comedic sections here and there, but trust me, they are spread few and far between. But I just wanted to mention that right off the bat, this movie is already a downgrade from the original because they did not reuse the 8-bit Mickey intro that the original Wreck-It Ralph had. I don't know if it's because they just thought it wouldn't fit as much since this movie isn't that much about video games as much as the first movie was, or if they just forgot, which, you know, honestly, I'd believe that answer probably more than the first, considering how much else they forgot about the first movie, as you will see. It doesn't take very long into the movie for you to realize a consistent fact about this movie, or should I say, about Ralph in this movie. That being, of course, that he is a complete idiot with almost no intelligence whatsoever, which, and I shouldn't have to say this, is completely untrue to his character and not at all like what he was in the first movie. Sure, he may have had a couple moments where he was being dim, but he wasn't stupid, just oblivious or ignorant in those cases. But in this movie, his IQ has practically been reduced to 0. There are many examples to come which really push this point to the forefront. Unfortunately, it's not just Ralph that has it bad in this movie. Vanellope is also terrible in this movie. Her entire story is completely horrendous, and you'll see why as we go along. But I also wanted to point out that at the beginning of the movie, when she's doing the race in Sugar Rush, she's just insulting the other drivers as she races. I know Vanellope is a very blunt character, but I never took her for a jerk. And it's honestly kind of strange too, because she's not that much of a jerk throughout the rest of this movie, so this scene is just extremely out of place. And of course, I could go on and on about how Ralph and Vanellope's friendship has been completely ruined from the first movie. Not only is the plot of this movie basically about breaking up their friendship, but we'll get to that later, but their friendship in the first place is just misrepresented and completely inaccurate to how they were in the original movie. Ralph has just been turned into a complete obsessive over Vanellope. And this doesn't even make any sense. I mean, not only was he not obsessed with her in the original movie, but he should have far more friends than just Vanellope, yet this movie basically treats it as if Vanellope is his only friend, and if he loses her, he loses everything, which doesn't even make any sense. I mean, what about Felix? They had completely made up by the end of the original movie. Surely they're best friends now. I mean, Callhoun's still around. I mean, even the Nicelanders, for Pete's sake. I mean, basically everyone in this universe thinks Ralph is a cool guy at this point, so how come he thinks Vanellope is his only friend? Ralph's obsessiveness causes him to make the most stupid and insane decisions in this movie. The first of many being when he decides to, 1, go into Sugar Rush during live arcade hours when he should be in his game. I mean, this was a huge point in the first movie. You can't just leave your game while the arcade's open. They'll think it's broken. But not only does he do that, no, he also goes into Vanellope's game while someone is playing the game. And on top of all that, he does it just to create a random side racetrack that he could have done any other time. Like, how stupid is Ralph? You know, honestly, I shouldn't even ask that. The writers of this movie have little to no faith in his intelligence, obviously. Vanellope is also a complete idiot too, I should mention. She should know full well that driving on this custom track by Ralph will ruin the game and cause the real world people to think that it's broken. But she does it anyways. And you want to hear the greatest part about all this? Despite both Ralph and Vanellope being equally guilty in the breaking of Sugar Rush, Vanellope basically gets off scot-free, and Ralph is the one who has to carry all the blame for the rest of the movie. I mean, isn't it obvious that Vanellope is also guilty? This movie actually has like an agenda against Ralph or something. I should also mention that Litwack, the arcade owner, is also a bit of an idiot. I mean, if the steering wheel doesn't smoothly slide back on, then pushing it with all your might is not going to get it to go back on. It's just gonna break the wheel. I mean, what did he expect to happen? Oh, and you know how Ralph is so stupid in this movie that he can't even make logical decisions anymore? Well, guess what? Not only can he not do that, he can't even understand basic English anymore. When one of the children clearly says eBay, he somehow hears it as EBOY.
On eBay!
Really? We're just gonna get another wheel from the EBOY.
What? This is not the only time he will misunderstand basic English. No. This happens quite a few times, actually. So now Sugar Rush gets unplugged and Vanellope is out of a home. Of course, this obviously makes her sad, and, you know, Ralph, being the good friend he is, should immediately want to go and comfort Vanellope and tell her how everything's going to be alright. Nope!
I'm thinking we make a fort up here, or like a yurt.
Ralph is too in love with himself, apparently, now, that he doesn't even care about Vanellope's feelings. Just going on and on about how much fun they're still gonna have, and that none of this really matters. It'll all be fixed in the end. I mean, the gall of the writers to not only make Ralph into a stupid idiot, but to also make him selfish and insensitive too. It's like whoever wrote this movie just really hated Ralph as a character and wanted to make him into the worst possible human being. And on a side note, slightly less egregious, but I have to bring it up anyways, it's more of a nitpick, but I find that the animation on the Nicelanders looks almost a bit too smooth and lacks that low frame rate style that they had in the original movie. Maybe it's just me, but they seem a bit off in their movements. But like I said, that's really just a nitpick compared to all the other stuff that I've not only already talked about, but all the stuff yet to come. Also, did I mention that the comedy in this movie is terrible and rarely ever funny?
It is new, it is different, and therefore we should fear it.
I'll mention if there's anything good, but the majority of it is not even worth bringing up at all because it's pretty cringe stuff. A prime example of the comedy not being very good in this movie is actually Felix and Callhoun, who are pretty much completely sidelined in this movie and only exist to make bad jokes about parenting for some reason. Oh, well, actually, there is one other scene that Felix is involved in other than the stupid parenting joke stuff. The EBOY scene. There are several scenes in this movie that could be contenders for the top 10 stupidest scenes in cinematic history, but this one might just take the cake. Maybe not of all stupid scenes in cinematic history, but of the stupid scenes in this movie, I mean. First, we get more of Ralph being a completely insensitive jerk idiot, trying to shove the blame off his shoulders as much as possible in what he says.
You know, I can't help but think this whole mess is somehow partially my fault.
As well as completely somehow not understanding Vanellope's feelings at all, which doesn't make any sense, of course, as I already mentioned. But then, on top of all that, they had to go and give us Felix randomly saying, "You boy."
Hey, boy.
Which, you know, no one says that. I've never heard a single person in my entire life ever utter the words, "you boy," in such a forced manner that Ralph would connect it to his nonsensically misunderstood EBOY. I mean, first of all, he should have just clearly heard that they said eBay, but of course he had to somehow misunderstand that just so that when Felix inexplicably says, "you boy," that he'll recognize his nonsensical misunderstood EBOY as being what Felix is somehow saying, and then connect that back to eBay, which convinces him to go to the internet. This has to be one of the most contrived reasons for a character doing anything in any movie ever. I mean, the entire rest of the plot of this movie doesn't happen unless Ralph mishears eBay as EBOY and Felix randomly says, "Yo boy." I mean, we're what, like 15 minutes into the movie at this point? Of an hour and 35 minutes? Oh, dear. Save me now, and trust me, it only gets worse. Before Ralph and Vanellope actually go to the internet, though, I just want to mention another minor nitpick. Just the fact that they tricked Surge Protector so easily. I mean, is he really that thick? Maybe, kind of, but this is pushing it a lot. I mean, it's obvious they're trying to get into the internet, the fact that they're walking in this general direction. He's not even slightly suspicious of this. But, you know, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, I guess. But you know what does matter? The fact that Ralph is randomly also a coward now, too, just to add on top of all those negative traits. Since when the chibi Litwack appears right in front of him, he just jumps back like a coward. It's like, ooh, a gremlin.
Ah, that's a gremlin. Stay away, it's a gremlin.
What? Let's just move on. Oh, but don't even get me started on the product placement in this movie. It's absolutely everywhere. You can barely go 2 minutes without seeing a new product pop up. I'm sure Disney was swimming in money from all the deals they made with all these companies.
Am I really gonna defile this grave for money? Of course I am!
But boy, does it only make this movie harder to watch. I mean, sure, it's the internet. Of course there's gonna be lots of products everywhere, but the degree to which they shove some of them in your face is pretty ridiculous. Another thing that's just about as unbearable as all the advertisements is just how cringy and outdated some of the references and memes in this movie are. I mean, it's a pretty bad idea to reference internet memes in a movie in the first place, since most of them will only last maybe a year at most before people stop using them and they become completely outdated and forgotten. And then people look back at them and think, yeesh, why did we ever think that was funny? And that's exactly how I feel looking back at all those scenes in this movie. Especially the Chewbacca mom reference, that one's extremely painful. What were they thinking? Oh, and another thing you shouldn't get me started on is Ralph somehow mistaking Google for goggles. Remember when I said he wouldn't understand basic English sentences as a theme for this movie? Oh, but thank goodness we've at last reached something positive. Since I actually do like Knowsmore, he is actually a pretty funny character, and the way he tries to finish everyone's sentences is actually pretty hilarious. Also, the 2D animation on his eyes is pretty cool too, I'll admit. But alas, he's only here for a few minutes, and then he pops up back at the end, but he's not really very good at the end, so, you know, this is pretty much the only good scene with him in the movie, so relish it while you can. Oh dear, we've reached yet another insanely stupid scene in the form of the auction scene at eBay. And before you say anything, let me just clarify something. Even though there's only 30 seconds left when they arrive, it's very obvious that what they're betting on uses real money. First of all, because Litwack said so earlier in the movie.
How much? That's more than this game makes in a year.
And second of all, Ralph and Vanellope should both have at least a basic understanding of how buying something works. I mean, once they had bet 10,000, they had so far beaten the only other person bidding that they had already given up. There was no reason to continue, yet they mindlessly just keep shouting larger and larger numbers for no reason. I assume this is supposed to be funny, but it's so stupid that the joke is completely lost. Oh, and you'll never guess what happens when Ralph gets to the checkout. He once again can't comprehend basic English sentences.
I'll just need a credit card number.
Sorry, what's a credit card number?
Oh, and also, just to add on to the negative traits of Ralph in this movie, he's also basically a liar, and borderline tries to become a criminal at this point. He basically tries to get away with taking the wheel without paying for it, which very nearly turns him into a thief. You know, and he was gonna be perfectly fine with it. He felt no moral guilt at the idea of lying. But that is nowhere near as painful as the part right afterwards, where he throws a big fat tantrum like a baby.
What?
What a scam! We're so close! We wanted that!
I could feel my soul being drained from me while watching this tantrum scene. Mercifully, one of the only other good things in this movie shows up to dull the pain slightly. That being Spamley, another character I actually kind of like. His whole gimmick of running up in people's faces and shoving his ads in front of them is actually pretty clever and funny for once. Another funny detail about Spamley is the fact that he makes it out that you'll get rich playing video games, but then once Ralph and Vanellope actually show up, all his get-rich-quick schemes just about to a few dollars. Also, I like how he's connected to the dark web, you know, considering how many shifty ads always pop up on the internet. I mean, if the rest of the movie was as clever as Spamley, you know, maybe it might be watchable. But alas, he's basically the exception to this nightmare. What's this? Shocker alert! Another decent scene? 2 in a row? Trust me, this won't happen again for the rest of the movie. But I do actually like this infiltration into Slaughter Race scene. The 2 real-life players' avatars' glitchy, funny-looking movements is actually pretty hysterical, and very accurate to similar games in real life. Actually, it reminds me a lot of Final Fantasy VIII, actually, in the way they move. The part where Ralph shows up at the door right after they say that the only person who'd be able to steal this car would have to be some sort of genius, I'll admit, that's pretty funny. And his short-lived attempts at distracting them is also pretty funny. In fact, this might be the only scene in the whole movie where Ralph is anywhere remotely close to how he was in the original movie. Of course, it only happens because he was too cowardly to run in and grab the car in the first place, because, you know, he's a coward now.
Where are you going?
I am scared.
I get it.
I don't get it.
But, you know, that aside, this scene is pretty good. Unfortunately, it ends all too quickly and we get the chase scene, which is not very good for multiple reasons. I mean, for starters, during the chase, Vanellope says,
Oh, Mother Hubbard.
"Wow, that's so funny, and totally not a cringy curse word substitute at all." The chase itself seems fine, but the ending completely ruins it. I mean, the fact that Ralph and Vanellope don't get the car almost seems like a slap in the face to both the audience and the idea of thinking outside of the box. I mean, Ralph and Vanellope come up with this creative strategy to distract Shank and then quickly make off with the car, instead of running in head first and trying to take it from her by fighting her off. But no, we can't reward people for thinking outside of the box, because Shank is the most perfectest ever person ever. I'm sorry. I don't really like Shank. She's given absolutely no flaws whatsoever in this entire movie, and I get that she's a side character, and thus doesn't need as much depth as the rest of the characters, but they basically make her out to be the most coolest person there ever was, who's also really nice and gives out great advice too. Don't you want to be like Shank? Ah, who cares about that Ralph, idiot? He's a stupid jerk. You see why I don't like Shank? She basically only exists to make Ralph look worse.
What were they thinking?
Oh, and did I mention the fact that she just gets her car back at the end of the chase anyways? Makes this entire section feel completely pointless. Oh, and you want to know what makes this whole Shank car stealing scene actually even more redundant and pointless? The fact that nothing is stopping Ralph or Vanellope from winning. The writers seem to have forgotten that Ralph has this little ability that we call super strength. He could easily have just beaten up Shank and her crew and threw their cars out of the way, grabbed her car and ran with it. And I mean literally, ran while holding it above his head. And before you say anything, no, this would not be murder of any sort, since they're inside a game. And you know what happens if you are a character from that game, in the game, when you die? You just respawn. So Ralph would just be sending him back to the respawn point. It's also not like Ralph thinks taking the car would be criminal in any way, or else he wouldn't be fine with stealing it. So this doesn't actually alter his motives in any way. If he had just beaten up Shank's crew and taken the car right here and now, the movie would be over. It's actually just that stupid. It's so stupid that it basically reduces anything positive I had to say about this scene to nothing. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, the only reason he doesn't get away with it is because, well, that would be stealing, and we can't have the main character steal something. But, you know, they're fine with Ralph doing every other possible despicable thing he might do in this movie. And besides, it's just one car. Is one car really not worth stealing to save an entire game from being permanently shut down?
Rockotar would like to clarify that he does not condone stealing of any sort, and that this example is only used because it is a fictional car from a fictional video game inside of a fictional movie, and thus is not connected to such rules that would exist in real life against stealing, which are for the betterment of society. Thank you for your understanding.
In fact, Shank is actually pretty selfish for hoarding this car to herself. But of course, the movie never calls out this selfishness, therefore it isn't an actual flaw. Since in my book, a flaw has to be called out by the movie in order for it to actually count as a flaw. Well, there goes like 15 minutes of my life. Also, I should mention that this movie in general is kinda just too long. I already mentioned it's an hour and 35 minutes, which is a bit longer than your average animated movie. I mean, albeit not as long as some other animated movies like Fantasia and Moana are longer, I think. But this movie does nowhere near enough stuff in its plot to justify its runtime. I mean, like I said, this entire slaughter race scene is virtually pointless, outside of setting up Vanellope's tragically awful storyline, that is. But I mean, there's just so much time wasted, and the plot is constantly shifting what the main focus is every which way. I mean, first of all, they go to get a wheel. Oh, can't get the wheel because we don't have any money. Let's go get some money by stealing a car. Oh, well, can't steal the car. Let's go make a bunch of cringy videos. Oh, now we gotta go promote the videos because there's not enough money. Oh, what's that? Now we have the wheel, but it doesn't even matter because Vanellope wants to go off and which way. Oh, now Ralph's gotta stop her and go get a virus, but oh no, the virus has gone crazy. You get my point? Like, this whole movie is just a waste of your time, honestly. But, you know, back to where we were. Once Shank, the greatest ever, stops Ralph and Vanellope, Ralph then puts on this big pity party scene where he goes on and on about how sad it is that they couldn't get the money.
Her perfect little game broke, and it was my fault, so we're gonna try to fix it.
Oh, and what's that I hear? Another negative trait to add to the Wreck-It Ralph mountain of negative traits, as now Ralph is officially an emotional manipulator too. Wow, he's such a great character in this movie. But anyways, Shank, the greatest ever, sends them off to her friend to go make videos to earn money instead.
Before we get to the BuzzTube section, I would also like to mention one thing that happens right after the slaughter race part. That being that Ralph immediately vilifies and rejects Shank, despite the fact that she has basically only treated them nicely so far. She's technically responsible for incinerating the two players when they tried to take her car, but that's only because they tried to take her car. I mean, the fact that Ralph is still alive shows that Shank had mercy on him. So how come Ralph is now just ignoring every single positive trait about Shank, which are pretty much the only traits we've been shown so far of Shank, since as we know, she must be portrayed as perfect in order to make Ralph look even worse. But Ralph's judgmental reaction is so absurd due to the fact that it goes against the very themes and messages of the original movie. Not judging people based on what they look like, their position in life, or any sort of disability that they might have was literally the entire point of the original movie. So Ralph being this judgmental is one of the most out of character things in this entire movie.
You have allowed this Dark Lord to twist your mind until now you have become the very thing you swore to destroy.
Now where was I? Oh yes, the BuzzTube section. And oh boy, do I have a lot to say on this section. First of all, it kind of baffles me that they had to go and make up a video sharing platform called BuzzTube instead of, you know, just using YouTube. Oh, wait, never mind. They did this obviously because the way that Ralph earns his money in this movie does not at all match with how YouTube works on any functional level. This movie is outright deceptive in how it treats the ability to earn money online by creating videos. First and foremost, it is absolutely absurd to earn $27,000 in 8 hours. That is straight up impossible. Actually impossible. I would just outright give that a 0.00000 chance of ever happening. The biggest problem is that even if Ralph made a ton of videos in this short time frame, which is also highly questionable how he could do such a thing, but also is able to near instantly become famous online. What? This is actually just insulting to all the content creators on sites like YouTube who spend months or even years building up their channel to a point where they could even earn money in the first place, much less $27,000. Oh, and did you know that the amount of money that you earn from sites like YouTube is nowhere near enough to reach $27,000? Not even in a whole year. In fact, you'll be lucky if you earn half that much in a year, much less 8 hours. Additionally, on top of all of that, the types of videos that Ralph are making are not even very high quality videos. Every once in a blue moon, one of these videos blows up on YouTube or TikTok or something, but even then, they're all really short. And I should add that the shorter your video is, the less money you get. Why is that? Because the amount of money you earn is based on runtime. The combination of views plus runtime is what makes you the most money. Even if you get like 10 million views on like a 1-minute video, it probably won't even translate to that much in the end. But getting 10 million views on a 30-minute video, well, that's a completely different story. But like I said in the first place, it's not likely that all of Ralph's videos are gonna blow up like they do in the movie. It's actually outrageous that there are 3 people in an office watching Ralph videos at the same time. Aren't they supposed to be working? Surely Ralph is not so popular that everyone in the whole world wants to watch Ralph videos. Oh, and the insults to actual real-life content creators go even further, by the way, as this movie basically treats the idea as earning a bunch of money online as something that's easy, a way to cheat the system, which is downright despicable. It's a slap in the face to all the hard-working content creators on sites like YouTube who put hours and days, weeks even into their videos. I mean, I know for sure that I don't just pop out a video every single day with no effort, and it's all this effort that makes it so crushing when your video doesn't do so well, but all the more rewarding when people do actually watch it. And like I said, you're probably not even gonna earn that much money anyways. Cheat the system, my foot. Oh, and did I even mention, yes! It was supposed to be an algorithm, but it's a complete and utter misunderstanding of how algorithms actually work. I mean, in the movie, we see her like swiping videos like she's deciding who's gonna watch the videos or if no one's gonna watch them. But that's not how algorithms work. Every video is always given a chance. To use the YouTube algorithm as my main example is that the YouTube algorithm looks at a video and compares it to similar videos that are targeting a similar audience. It then finds those audience members who watched similar videos and shows the video to them. And if those audience members actually clicked on the video and watched it a lot, it then pushes it to even more people. But if nobody watched it in its first test, then it gets buried and not watched by many people at all. So it's not a matter of deciding whether the video will be watched or not. How well the video does depends on how good its thumbnail and the quality of the content is that gets people watching it. It's more about whether people actually choose to watch the video or not about whether YouTube decided it would get viewed or not. Oh, and also this algorithm scene is just so bad. More Ralph being a complete head-empty dummy idiot. Oh, and we're at a point where I'm starting to want to strangle a chicken or something. Once Ralph does finally finish making most of his videos, and Vanellope desires to go out and spread the news, we get one of the most painful scenes in this entire movie. And I know I've called other scenes painful, but this one is really painful. They straight up imply in this scene that Ralph is actually a kid on the same level as Vanellope.
What if you get lost? You're just a kid.
Oh, and you're some mature adult.
Well, I'm bigger.
What?
He is canonically over 30 years old. This doesn't make any sense. It's like the writers just decided that he was a kid before they even started watching the movie, and thus reduced his intelligence to practically nothing because they're like, he's just a kid. It actually just makes me mad. But I don't know what's worse at this point, saying Ralph is just a kid, or the oh my Disney scenes. I think I actually started losing my mind during some of these parts. This entire segment is basically just that meme where the guy is putting the medal on himself, except that guy is Mickey Mouse. Absolutely nothing of plot relevance happens in this entire section. It's just a way for Disney to promote their other movies that I'd much rather be watching right now. And oh my, we've at last reached the infamous Disney princess scene. The part that everyone went crazy about, and even some of the haters say is one of the only good parts of the movie. I respectfully disagree. I find that at least half of the princesses in this scene are wildly out of character. Take Cinderella, for example. The first thing that she does is immediately smash her glass slipper to turn it into a weapon. Why? Why would you ever do this? The glass slipper is something of high sentimental value and importance. Cinderella shattering her glass slipper right here is almost like a direct insult to the original Cinderella movie, if you ask me.
Or how about Belle, who they imply has been kidnapped and enslaved? Which, if you've actually watched the original Beauty and the Beast, is clearly not the case. She chose to stay with the Beast, therefore she has not been kidnapped, and the Beast is not forcing her to do anything. She's technically his guest in quotation marks. But that means she's free to do almost anything in the castle that she wants, except go to the West Wing. So therefore, she's not enslaved either.
And if the princesses aren't doing random out-of-character actions, then they're just spouting random, meaningless references to their original movies, yet again, which I'd rather be watching right now.
Did I even mention that half of the princesses don't even look like they should? Some of them are fine, like Snow White, Ariel, Mulan, and the CG princesses. But some of the others barely even resemble what they're supposed to look like, such as Pocahontas, Cinderella, and Tiana. If you ask me, this is just further proof that you can't replace 2D animation with 3D animation, as there are some art styles that just only work in 2D animation as opposed to 3D.
Should I even bother with this line?
Do people assume all your problems got solved because a big strong man showed up?
Yes, what is up with that?
I mean, first of all, it's not even accurate. It completely discredits every important action that any of the Disney princes did in any of the princess movies previously, even if said actions were vital to defeating the villain and saving the world. Let me tell you something, movie. Having characters insult other characters and put them beneath them does not make those characters stronger. In fact, it has the exact opposite effect. It makes them more unlikable. But on top of that, it's kinda just lame. If this is Disney's idea of quote-unquote feminism, then they really need to reboot their systems, preferably back to 1998 when they released the original Mulan. Still the best feminist movie with the best strong female character that Disney has ever produced, and they haven't topped it in the 24 years since. And also, do I even need to mention how ridiculous it is that all the princesses suddenly obsess over Vanellope as soon as she shows up and she's the star of the show? Do none of them have anything better to do? And on top of all that, how come all they're doing is just gossiping, playing dress-up and makeup, and doing like the most girlish things there ever was? In a pink room, no less. I thought just like 5 seconds ago they were insulting men and going on about how tough they are, but now they're being the most girly girls there ever was? Pick a side, Disney. Also insert cringe Vanellope steering wheel song, which is somehow not as bad as the song that's still yet to come. Oh, and I almost forgot, the singing into water nonsense is just another way to insult all the classics that came before this movie. It's like, for some reason they think it's dumb that the characters are looking into water to reflect upon themselves, but they completely missed the point. The characters aren't just looking into water, that's not what makes them sing. The reason they're looking into water is because it reflects them. They see themselves and question everything they've done up until this point, or what their life will mean, or their hopes and dreams and desires, whether they'll be in this position for all their life, or if they'll achieve something new and different and better. Not just that they were staring into water for no reason. Why do I even bother? It's impossible to reason with this movie. Meanwhile, Ralph is off making more cringy videos, but oh no, it looks like he doesn't have enough hearts to get the money he needs. Don't worry, just go in and force people to watch your videos. If they don't want to watch the videos in their own time, just make them.
What? Give me that whole thing.
So now we can add being obnoxious to the pile of Ralph's negative traits too. Even worse though than a lot of his other negative traits, the movie actually presents this as being a positive thing, like he's some hero for going in and forcing other people to watch his videos and spamming them on everyone. It's hysterical too, considering we actually get clips of people being annoyed that they're forced to watch his videos, yet it's still seen as a good thing. It's like the movie can't even make up its mind as to whether this is a bad thing or a good thing. But that is somehow nowhere near as bad as the very next scene with a comment section. I mean, not only are the comments an actual joke, I mean, the insults some of these people are spewing out are so pathetic and weak. No one would be hurt in the slightest by seeing it. Maybe some people. But most people would just clearly understand that these are just trolls or idiots saying stupid things. And on top of that, what makes it even worse is that Ralph gets so emotionally hurt by these comments, despite the fact that he endured so much worse in the first movie, and that never broke him. You'd think that going through everything he had to go through in the first movie would, you know, make him stronger and harder to these types of comments about him. But no, now he's even more weak and pathetic. If someone even says the slightest mean thing to him, he breaks down into tears.
Rockotar would like to clarify that he does not intend to insinuate that anyone who is emotionally moved to tears by such mean comments is weak and pathetic. And this comment is only targeted at Ralph, a character who is indeed being weak and pathetic in this instance due to what we know about him from the prior movie. Thank you for your understanding.
He doesn't even know these people that are saying these things. The people in the original movie, he knew them personally. That means it should have hurt harder when they said those things. Yet somehow these randomos on the internet saying really weak insults gets to him, and what the people had said in the original movie doesn't. And we also have to add onto the garbage heap Yes's advice in quotation marks to always avoid the comments. When I hear this line, I laugh.
First rule of the internet: do not read the comments.
But not because it's hysterically funny, but because it's so bad it's good. As I already mentioned, the kind of people who say these stupid things are just trolls. They're pretty easy to spot if you've been on the internet for even just a little while. And most people know to just ignore these idiots and focus on what everyone else is saying. The fact of the matter is, most comments are actually positive or neutral. So avoiding the comments altogether will actually end up in you missing out on a lot of praise you might have received instead. And just because a comment is negative doesn't always mean it's just a troll saying mean things. Some negative comments are designed to be critical of the original creator, but not in a way where they're trying to insult them, but in a way that they're trying to improve the type of content they're making, such as saying that there was a lack of editing in a certain section of the video that made it a bit weaker. They're not trying to insult the creator by saying this. They're telling them that the content could be better if they improved a certain section. If you just ignore all these comments, your content will never become better. Yes is basically just telling Ralph to shut himself off from the rest of the world, plug his ears with his hands, and go la 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 la. I think this line says more about Disney than it says about the internet, if you ask me. Uh-oh. It's time for Vanellope's other song, the much longer and much worser one. This song is just pure cringe in every possible way. The lyrics are bad, the visuals are way too over the top, and I don't want to sound mean, but Vanellope ain't exactly got the best singing voice either. And could someone just explain to me why a clown inexplicably drives up on a bicycle into the air to say,
"Happy dreams, not creepy clown dreams,"
and then reverse bicycles off the screen out of nowhere? That is how random and stupid this entire song is. And of course, on top of all that, it's basically Vanellope just singing about how she wants to go turbo. You know, the thing that the villain of the first movie did that we're supposed to despise him for doing. You know, because he abandoned his own game because he selfishly wanted to go to another that he thought was cooler. Doesn't that sound familiar? Vanellope's motivation for wanting to go to Slaughter Race is almost entirely selfish. She completely ignores every negative that could come from her leaving, and just goes on about how she needs something new and fresh. This is supposed to tie into the overarching theme of clinginess or whatever with Ralph, but I'll get to more on that failed attempt at a message later. Vanellope completely ignores the fact that she's the princess of her own game. I mean, how are they supposed to run the kingdom without her? I mean, sure, they could replace her, but since every character in every game is designed specifically for that position in that game, it'll be pretty hard to replace her. On top of that, she just assumes that because there's so many racers, people can just pick other racers, and completely forgets the fact that she's the most popular character in the game. People are not gonna play the game if they can't play the most popular character. And on top of all of that, she doesn't even consider how it will make all the people in her own game feel if she leaves. She's just abandoning all her friends. I mean, she doesn't even say goodbye. As far as they know, she just disappeared and get a message from Ralph or something later at the end of the movie. Vanellope, she left to go live in the middle of the internet somewhere. But the main problem is, it fundamentally does not work with the already established rules set up in the first movie. In this situation, Vanellope is acting just as selfish as Turbo was. You know, just less evil. Yet, we're supposed to root for her and despise Turbo. This movie is asking you to either completely forget the entire Turbo plotline of the original movie, which, you know, is pretty hard to forget, or to just accept both storylines despite the fact that they contradict each other, basically turning you into a hypocrite. secret. The level of writing in this movie is so atrocious. Nowhere is it better showcased than in the very next scene. How does this movie manage to get worse as it goes along? You know, the scene where Ralph spies on Vanellope and learns about the fact that she's now besties with Shank, the greatestest person ever, and how she wants to live in Slaughter Race. I mean, Ralph is right to be upset that she wants to go to Slaughter Race, but not for the reasons the movie portrays, but, for the aforementioned lore-breaking reasons. But his reaction to Vanellope calling Shank her friend is so absolutely absurd, it boggles the mind. Ralph so absolutely refuses to accept the fact that Vanellope could ever be friends with anyone other than himself for, unknown reasons, that he outright says she must have been brainwashed.
No, she's been brainwashed. That's what this is.
When I heard this on my most recent watching, I simply had to pause the movie and stop watching for a moment. Just so I could go and rant to someone about how bad and stupid this is. Answer me this, Ralph. Who is brainwashing Vanellope? You were with her the entire first trip to Slaughter Race, which means that the only thing that could have compelled her to return to Slaughter Race was her own choice. With the bare minimum of a logical deduction, you can deduce that Vanellope has not been brainwashed. But no! Ralph has been reduced to -5 IQ in this movie. Basic thinking skills are not on his list of abilities. Oh, and also, this is the point in the movie where Ralph quite literally becomes the villain. Isn't that so great that Ralph is the villain? You see the problem with this? One of the whole main themes of the original movie is that despite Ralph being a villain, he's not a bad guy, and that people's first impressions and preconceptions of people aren't always right, that there's always more to them than shown on the surface. Oh, but of course, let's just throw all that out of the window. He's now the bad guy for real. They basically just, undone everything about Ralph from the original movie at this point. There's nothing left about what made him good. Every element of his character has been torn apart, trudged through the mud, and thrown in a fiery dumpster. The writers of this movie should be ashamed of this abomination they have created. We're at a point where I don't even feel like giving out the minor compliments every now and again, but, if I have to, I don't mind the dark net area. It's actually kind of funny to see characters go to the dark web in a Disney movie. But of course, this is a very short-lived compliment section. As you know, the usual very next scene ruins everything. I mean, this movie has so little faith in Ralph's intelligence that they make him hesitate when he's asked if he is stupid.
Are you stupid?
Well,
And oh dear, it's the part where they introduce the insecurity virus.
Offers what I call an insecurity virus.
Quite possibly the worst thing in this entire movie. Outside of Ralph's characterization, of course. I mean, it's painfully on the nose. Absolutely no subtlety whatsoever. The whole insecurity, clinginess messaging of this movie completely fails in the first place because every character is so stupid. But they really, really love to hammer you over the head with these ideas throughout the entire movie. It's like they assumed all the audience members would be 5-year-olds or less. Oh, and did you know that the stupidity of this movie's insecurity message goes so far that they actually straight up retcon Vanellope's glitch to be something that only happens because she is insecure, as the virus copies her glitch as an insecurity and distributes her insecurity to other parts of the race, making it so that her glitch is literally only her insecurities.
Insecurity detected.
Alright, who's responsible for this change? Tell me where they are! I just wanna talk. If you don't know why I'm so upset, it's because Vanellope's glitch in the original movie was partially supposed to be a subtle representation of disabled people, and part of the message of the original movie was that Vanellope could still be great despite having a glitch, and it was wrong for the others to treat her as lesser for having it. But now, this movie has decided to alter her glitch to now represent everything negative about her, so now her glitch is seen exclusively as a bad thing that needs to be cured. Do you see the problem? This is insulting not only to the characters, but the audience members who are inspired by the positive messages of Vanellope in the original. And oh boy, is the breakup scene that comes next also extremely painful to watch. Both characters decide to crank the selfish meter to 100 and end their friendship over a stupid misunderstanding. This movie is running on an extra special stupid fuel at this point. Also, Vanellope has to remind us that she won't be missed, but I already pointed out that that's completely illogical and she will obviously be missed if she leaves. And of course, on top of that, she adds to add to the stupidity by saying that a friend would never do something like Ralph did, yet simultaneously refuses to hear his side of the argument.
You will not follow me.
Vanellope, please.
A friend would never do what you did. Never.
How do you know he didn't do it because he cared if you don't even hear out his side of the argument? And of course, Ralph is a complete idiot, the usual for this movie, by sending the virus in the first place.
Not a great plan.
But on top of that, he then tries to play dumb, like he didn't know this was gonna happen.
I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It's not supposed to be this bad.
No, and also something bad happening, and that just confirms that Ralph is actually stupid, because that's what they implied in the earlier scene. Ready for another slap to the face from this movie? Well, here it comes in the form of Ralph's medal from Vanellope broken in two. This is supposed to be a thematic representation of their friendship breaking, but it only broke for stupid and forced reasons, so that just comes off as the writers giving us the finger for ever liking the two as friends in the first place. Also, are we supposed to feel bad for Ralph here? His actions are so stupid that it's impossible to feel sorry for this happening to him.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Calm down, Rockotar. Calm down. You're almost at the end of this dumpster fire. Just gotta make it through the idiotic final battle.
Ralph's insecurities being used as a virus doesn't actually make any logical sense. While I hate what they imply with Vanellope's glitch, at least her having a glitch makes sense for a virus. But how can Ralph's personal feelings be scanned and copied? That doesn't even make any sense. The virus is supposed to find insecurities in the system, not personal insecurities of people. This is just nonsensical drivel so that the painfully awful finale can happen. Oh, and speaking of, we've at last reached the horrendous finale where the army of Ralph zombie viruses are unleashed.
Please, no! No! No!
Do I even have to say anything? Not only is this so far over the top in this movie's failed attempt at its cleanest message, but it's just plain stupid. Ralph has been reduced so far from how he was in the first movie that he is not only the villain of this film, but an army of mindless, obsessive zombies as well. Why, Disney? Why? And this movie is so unsubtle and ungraceful with its messaging that they feel the need to not only smash you over the head as we've discussed, but also have Knowsmore literally explain the message point blank to Ralph's face, while also demeaning and insulting him further, because we haven't had enough of that yet. And this next part both makes me mad and confuses me. Ralph asks Knowsmore what to do to get rid of the viruses, and Knowsmore tells him and Vanellope to lead them through an antivirus gate or something. But guess what? They literally never do this! Why bring this up as seemingly the only way to defeat the viruses if that's not even what they're going to do? Wait, let me slow down. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. And did you know in the very next scene, yes! Also has to take a jab at Ralph, just for good measure. Also, later in the same scene, Ralph himself repeats the same point-blank, hammer-over-the-head explanation of this movie's bad excuse for a theme.
From up here, I can see how I do come across as needy and clingy and self-destructive, like Knowsmore said.
Don't you get it, audience? Don't be clingy, or else you too will become a mindless zombie virus. Get it? And then, of course, they have to take the stupid levels to 110 with the giant Ralph monster. Though, to be fair, the part where Ralph fights him for a bit is slightly more entertaining than the other 99% of this movie. Obviously, nowhere near good enough to improve my opinion in any meaningful way, oh me oh my. Let's talk about how Ralph and Vanellope actually do stop the viruses. You know, since the movie just completely forgets about the gate thing Knowsmore said. Thematically speaking, this is not the worst way to beat the viruses. However, that would be assuming that the theme was any good in the first place. Well, actually, let me clarify something in case I'm getting off the wrong idea. I actually like the idea of this theme, that clinginess can ruin friendships and other relationships. It's an important lesson that people need to learn, and using this as the theme of a Disney movie is actually a good idea on paper. Note that I said on paper. This movie has thus far completely failed in its theme because it's so over the top in how it portrays this clinginess, and that they have to greatly reduce the intelligence of characters like Ralph to even put them in a position where their friendship is at risk. And, as I've mentioned about 1,000,000 times, this movie only knows how to relay its theme with sledgehammer to the face tactics. I wonder if all the countless times I've mentioned how unsubtle this theme is in and of itself a reference to how unsubtle the themes of this movie are. And with all that explained, let me tell you the even bigger problem with how Ralph and Vanellope beat the viruses. It doesn't make any logical sense! The virus only scanned and copied Ralph's insecurities, meaning that there shouldn't be anything positive in those viruses. No redeeming qualities. So how come it listens to reason and just disappears? It should only be possible to get rid of the viruses by leading them through the gate, as that would simply erase them. Ralph already saw the error of his ways and admitted his problem, in a very blunt and unsubtle scene. So what is the problem with just deleting the viruses through the gate? Was the climax just not epic enough yet? I'm done trying to make sense of the senselessness of this movie. Whilst I was editing this video, I realized another fact about this movie that's terrible. A fact so bad that I couldn't not include it in this analysis. I don't even know how I missed it the first time I was writing my notes and recording this video. But that fact is that the internet is massively damaged by Ralph's actions with the virus. But the movie doesn't even acknowledge this at all. What? I mean, they basically completely wiped out entire websites. And yet, as soon as the Ralph viruses disappear, the movie completely forgets that any destruction whatsoever happened at all. Additionally, the fact that the movie just ignores all the destruction caused by the Ralph monsters makes the entire final battle feel completely pointless and inconsequential. Why does it matter if all these buildings and internet sites get destroyed if they're not even going to acknowledge that they got destroyed at all? And on top of that, nothing bad happens to Ralph because of his actions. He basically gets away with unleashing this virus on everyone. No repercussions whatsoever. Sure, he didn't intend to unleash this virus on the internet, but he is still the one responsible for letting it happen. Is no one upset at him? Does Ralph not feel guilty about what he let happen? Should he not be spending all his free time trying to make up and repair all the damage he caused? Why does this just get completely ignored? Well, at least you were rewarded with one of the only funny jokes in this movie. And no, not the princess's rescue, although I do get a small laugh out of the Prince Naveen appearance. No, I'm talking about the hilarious Spamley save failure, the only joke to actually get an audible laugh from me.
Park it right here, Ralph. Your old pal JT Spamley's got you. Wow, that didn't work.
And of course, this is the part where Vanellope decides that she is going to go turbo full-time. No one will call her out, no consequences. Just forget the original movie even existed, please. And thus, Ralph returns back to the arcade. And we get to see Felix and Callhoun again. Those two great characters from the first movie who were reduced to lame parenting jokes at the beginning and end of this movie and thrown in the trash for the rest of the runtime. Oh, how badly I wish I could say I'm happy to see them again. But alas, they only exist for the bad parenting jokes, so it's not really that great to see them. Though I suppose they at least avoided being horribly assassinated like Ralph and Vanellope. And to end off the movie, just a couple random scenes with Ralph, and then he tells Vanellope about everything he's done. Nothing particularly special, just typical epilogue fluff. And with that, the nightmare finally ends.
The mission. The nightmares. Finally over.
But let us just conclude everything we have learned from this movie and why it is the worst sequel ever made in the history of sequels. Probably. Unless there's a sequel that's worse that I've not seen yet. But this is the worst one I've ever seen.
A little while back, I made a video talking about why I thought Toy Story 2 was a perfect sequel. Everything that movie did perfectly right as a sequel, this movie does perfectly wrong.
I bring this up because I find that to be the best sequel ever made, whereas this is the worst sequel ever made. So this movie is basically the anti-Wreck-It Ralph and the anti-Toy Story 2, and how it does everything wrong that those movies did right. Its biggest flaw is, of course, how badly it character assassinates both Ralph and Vanellope. Any movie that character assassinates any character is almost always just gonna immediately be an F-tier movie, as it directly insults not only the character that was originally created, but the writer who created them and all the audience members who loved them. It's a horrible thing to do to anyone. Whenever you're writing a sequel, if you're not the original writer, then you should always strive to have the utmost respect and care for someone else's characters that were created before you. And do not just do whatever you want because it fit your idea of a theme, which is, the second thing this movie fails at. Its theme, despite being good on paper, doesn't work. But since I more recently explained this in the video, I won't go over that again. The movie is also just poorly paced and wastes your time with so much nonsense and cringy advertisements every 5 seconds. The entire section where Ralph is using videos to make money is a horrible representation of how you make money on video creation sites. Oh, and also, the fact that this movie mostly takes place in the internet and is completely separated from the original arcade world makes it not a very good sequel in the idea that it doesn't really do much with the original ideas from the original movie. They feel so disconnected. One is about video games, and the other one's about the internet. Sure, they're vaguely connected in how they're both technology-based, but other than that, they're completely random and different. I mean, you'll probably have long forgotten that Ralph and Vanellope are video game characters partway through this movie. Meanwhile, in the original, that's like the whole point. I wish I could say that having the internet was a cool way of expanding the world, but since most of it is just nonsensical advertisements and plot lines that go nowhere, it doesn't really actually do much to expand the universe. It's just Disney patting themselves on the back for how many companies they got to coincide for this movie, and all the great movies they made previously. Go watch their stuff. Don't you know they basically own the entire media industry? It's also a bad sequel, and how it completely shafts Felix and Callhoun. Why couldn't they be part of the plot, even if they played a minor role? Like, why couldn't they be off doing something to try and help Ralph raise money, instead of just being shafted as random side parenting characters? I mean, at the very bare minimum, they could have, sprinkled a few scenes here and there of them trying to be good parents in the middle of the movie, just for comic relief. Or somehow tie that back into the original plot. But no, they're just, completely deleted from this universe, basically, for the majority of the movie. And all the replacement characters we get instead are so bad. As I mentioned, Yes is a boring character that is a complete misrepresentation of how algorithms work. Shank is just an annoying, perfect character with no flaws, and she's only so perfect as she is just to make Ralph look worse, yet the movie wants you to love her anyways. It's like, how do you expect me to like these new characters? Well, except Knowsmore and Spamley, who are actually good, but with the exception of those two, the rest of them all suck. This movie is such a bad sequel that it's also a bad sequel to all the Disney princess movies that all the princesses who appeared in the princess cameo scene appeared in. At its best, it's just lamely referencing the movies and devolving the characters to one-note traits. Although, to be fair, a few of them were pretty one-note already. Snow White. But at its worst, it's actually disrespectful, like with Cinderella breaking the glass slipper. I suppose there's one aspect I've somehow managed to go this entire review without mentioning at all, which is the animation, something I usually bring up in most Disney movie reviews that I do. And I will actually admit that I think this is a pretty good-looking movie, especially considering it's one of the very few modern Disney movies that doesn't just use the same bog-standard Tangle animation style. Just look at how many of them are in that unanimous art style. It just gets repetitive over time. But yeah, like I said, this is actually an exception to that. I mean, the whole internet world is basically just discount Coruscant, if you ask me. But the character designs are more unique and interesting for the most part, and there is a lot of variety in the locations they do go to. So I'd still say it looks better than pretty much every other modern Disney animated movie, except maybe the Frozen movies and Encanto. But that doesn't really matter, since everything bad about this movie completely outweighs the animation. That's just like a bonus if it's good. If a story is really good, I'm able to tolerate pretty bad animation. But if a story is really bad, high quality animation is not going to improve my opinion whatsoever. last but not least, I feel obligated to share what I would do to fix this movie's problems, to make a better version of Ralph Breaks the Internet. For starters, scrap everything and start fresh. Yes, I'm afraid this movie is just that fundamentally flawed. I can't honestly think of any ways to fix it and still keep it close to how it is. But if you forced me in the process of starting over to still use the internet somehow, I would at least make the plot about how arcades are becoming less popular as time goes along, and eventually this arcade will not be able to stay open because it can't earn enough money to justify that. And thus, the arcade would shut down forever, but all the gaming characters would have to escape into the internet to survive, and the plot would be about Ralph and Vanellope trying to find a new home for all the gaming characters. And also, why not throw Felix and Callhoun in there too, since they are completely abandoned in the current version we got? And you could still have, sprinkles of the friendship ties starting to struggle with how Ralph and Vanellope want different worlds for the gaming characters to inhabit as their new home. And through this, might have to discover that they have to separate and go their own ways, but can still be friends despite that. And just delete all the stupidity and turning Ralph into a villain nonsense. Make it happen realistically, as they realize that their paths are diverging in different ways, as neither of them would want to let the other one go, because they have so much fun with each other. And that could lead up to some sort of big scene where they both make a mistake or something that hurts their friendship, but not on the same stupidity levels that it happens in the current movie. I think that would be a much stronger message, while still keeping the central theme of clinginess. And that would more or less be my pitch for Ralph Breaks the Internet fixed version. And I think that pretty much brings us to the end of all my notes and things I wanted to say.
Well now, that certainly was a video. Just give me a moment to recollect my sanity, and while I'm doing that, why not leave a comment down below telling me what you think about Ralph Breaks the Internet, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, and if you really enjoyed it, then hey, maybe you could, support me on Patreon, just a suggestion, only if you have the cash, of course. And, while you're still here, why don't you check out some of my other videos, top priority, of course, being my first Wreck-It Ralph review, since, it precedes this movie. Or you could check out any one of my other Disney animated reviews in this here playlist. And most importantly of all, stay iconic.